Now, there are just some type of properties in a certain genre game that just really go together. For example, let's just use this one, Hot Wheels. The famous car, build your own tracks and then race them around, put them through the tracks and everything like that. That would be best as a racing game. That was the genre that would really go well together. And obviously, you can try to expand a bit and try different other genres within that franchise, but really, its bread and butter is gonna be a racing game of some kind in that genre. And there's not, then the same thing goes for Dragon Ball, the property. Its bread and butter really is a fighting game. They have done many different kinds of games, but really its bread and butter is a fighting game, and the proof really is in the pudding, and that pudding is Dragon Ball FighterZ. Now, welcome to my review of Dragon Ball FighterZ. Now, I usually will say for all my reviews they'll be spoiler free, and that we'll have a additional video called Spoiler Talk that will come out later, and then we'll talk all about the spoilers. But for this one, we will not have that. This will just be one video, and that is just because playing this game, I don't believe there really is anything really much in regards to spoiler territory. Everything I'm going to talk about really doesn't give anything away for the game. There is still little nooks and crannies hidden within the game, but there really it really just isn't a lot, and so therefore it doesn't really justify having its own video for just spoilers alone. So I will talk about the game. I am going to give some stuff away, but it's not big enough that I think if you go pick up the game after watching this video that you feel like you're going to be cheated out of the game out of maybe a couple surprises. And when I use surprises, it's very they're not really big surprises. They're just So but I do recommend you pick up this game first off, and if you want to pick up the game, be 100% not seeing anything, and then come on back and watch it, I highly recommend you can do that as well. So now, every time that when I think of Dragon Ball running out of material, they just like it just swears they just have another android on standby. There's just always another android ready to go to add, because they haven't hit 100 androids yet, and they're only at 21 now in this game. And the story reminded me a little bit of a DBZ movie that they had, and it was called Super Android 13, and it's where they had a new android introduced that wasn't part of the TV series, and it was super powerful, and then the heroes had to stop them. Now, in regards to this one's a little bit different, but they do have a new android, and that is Android 21. Now, she has taken characteristics of Majin Buu, and her whole point is she is waiting to turn the heroes and the villains as well into candy, where she consumes them and then gains their power. And so as she gets more powerful and powerful, she's basically claiming more heroes and villains to eat them up and claim them as their own for candy. And so it's up to the heroes to try to stop Android 21. Now, while that's happening, the heroes are being attacked by evil clones of themselves. And you end up running around linking with the heroes so they can fight, and defeating the evil clones and then stopping Android 21. Now, for this, when I'm talking about hero linking, while this is all happening, heroes and villains have lost their powers. They can not access them at all whatsoever, and so when they're fighting their clones, they're completely weak, and they're not able to beat their clone because they're not powerful anymore. And so the only way they're able to use their powers is when you are linked up with them, and you play as your own character that is linked in with either Frieza, Goku, or Android 18. And when you're linked to them, they're able to use their powers. And then you figure out you also can start linking to the other fighters, and that's how you kind of are able to utilize the fighters within the storyline and fight with them. So it's fun, and while it's a great introduction to the fighting and how it works, it allows you to also fight with the majority of the characters. And so that allows you to kind of figure out who you like fighting with, and figuring out their specials and what really works with you. The only downturn is that there's a lot of battles, and obviously it's a fighting game, but there's just not enough of story in the story mode to have enough story points. in the middle that really give you that extra motivation to keep going, because all you're doing is just battling the same kind of clones. They have a decent variety, but eventually you're facing the same Yamcha clone that you faced in the very, very beginning, and it doesn't feel any different. But it's nice to be able to work with as many fighters as possible so that you can understand how they work and then kind of get down your favorites, so that to be able, once you go into the online modes and all that kind of stuff, it allows the opportunity for you to be able to have that experience to be able to do better online in fighting. Now, one thing that did keep me going and was really refreshing was how it kind of worked with the battles in story mode. Was you were able to have 3 characters total, because each fight is, you have 3 characters total, and when one passes out, the next fighter goes in. If that person passes out, the last fighter goes in. If that person passes out, you lose. And you can, and we'll talk about it later, but you can exchange fighters mid-match, those kinds of things, and we'll talk about those more in detail later in this review. But the cool part was when you were picking your parties, and you were picking characters that might not have not been like together in the TV series, or rarely are together. They have some interesting interactions, because before each battle they'll have a conversation, and some of the conversations are really interesting and bring different insight, and just allows a fresh new take to be like, well, what if these characters were together? What if these characters were together? What would they say to each other? Or what insult would they pass? Or like, who would mock the other person? That kind of thing. So it allowed a cool variety, and I was always interested to mix up certain characters just to see how they would interact with each other before fights, and that made it all the more interesting in the end. And I think that was it was really beneficial in the end, and it really just was a positive to the game overall for it. Now, I do have 2 things where I call missed opportunities for the game, and they could have really expanded on these things, and I really think it would have made the game even more refreshing, even more better than it already is. One of the things is that it had 3 different story arcs, and at first when you're doing it, it seemed like the way they were titled, it was like, oh, it's the one story arc, and then you go to the next story arc, and they kind of fit together like a puzzle. So like, you've been through this one, and the things that were kind of gaps in that, you can fill in with this story arc. But that wasn't the case at all. They were completely different story arcs, and half of it, and there were actually 3 of them total. So there was one for the Z heroes, the Z fighters. My mistake, Z fighters. One for the Z fighters, one for the villains, and then one for the androids. And it just really, I felt a little disappointed in the sense of like, I appreciate the effort it could have. I appreciate if the effort they should have put to try to make these piece together to make one cohesive story. Because I bet they could have. And it would have worked really, really well. And it would have been so rewarding, because then it would have encouraged me more to keep going to each story arc. Because when I got to the end, I felt like, well, I enjoyed the story and everything, but it was just like, it was a little disappointing, because I was like, well, these don't fit together, and I was thinking they did, so I was trying to put them together, and it clearly didn't go together, and so it was a little like, oh, I wanted a revelation, I wanted something more epic together. And then finally I've looked it up, and they have stated that the Android version, so the final one you get to after completing the Z Fighters saga, and then the villains one, and then the androids are last, that Android one is the official storyline for the game. But I just wish they took the time to find a way to piece it all together, and then have that way that, like, it takes that effort. It's more appreciation for that for me. And that would have made me go over the moon and think that they really, really took their time on this game. Now, the other thing was that when you go through the story mode, and when you go from, how do you go from battle to battle, is basically it's kind of like a game board. You have a game board with locations, and locations are like pieces on the board. And you're a certain piece, so and you move from place to place, and there's like lines, so you can only go in certain directions to connect. And I'll put a visual on the screen so you can kind of tell what I mean by there's only certain paths that your piece can move to the place to place areas. And sometimes there's no one there in those places, sometimes there's villains in those places, so you fight those. Sometimes there's heroes you need to save, so you can add them to your roster. There's also the story point that you need to get to. And then on the top corner, I can't remember which corner exactly off the top of my head, but just somewhere around there, it lets you know of how many more moves you have left. So how many more times you can move your character from one place to another. And I thought at first it was like really interesting because as I was doing it in the beginning, I was like, oh, I only have about 2 moves left by the time I cover the entire area, plus getting to the final battle where I'm supposed to get to. Because if you run out of moves, you're done. You have to restart from that beginning chapter section again. And so as I got further and further down, it wasn't getting harder like I expected it to. And I felt like it was a missed opportunity because even though it is a fighting game, it would have been cool to add an extra element to it of a slight strategy for the storyline to say like there is a perfect way to go from piece to piece to piece to be able to cover all the enemies in the area and then get to the final opponent with only having 0 moves left. So to do that would have been really fun because it would have added a little bit more strategy to the game and added an extra dimension that I think the game was just lacking just a little bit in regards to the story mode because it was just too much of the same. But again, to be honest, I'm really nitpicking because, and when I have to do this, like that means this game is really good, and I think this game is really, really good, and the game truly makes me feel like I was interacting with the TV show. From how the game looks, the amazing graphics. I mean, this game looks beautiful, and the 3D animations of the characters, and that they seem like they're 2D, but they're actually 3D, and then the backgrounds are in a 2D image. But just the way that the characters look just matches so well with the show, and the sounds from the voice actors to the hits to the explosions, just the feel of the game truly made me feel like I was a kid again watching Dragon Ball in front of my eyes, and that's not the main reason why I think that it's amazing. I just think the way that it captured the show. And if any intellectual property can do that, that deserves high regards for that. I use that example for South Park, the South Park games. They capture the show so well within the game that it really should be commended for that, because taking an intellectual property and trying to turn it into a video game sometimes is very, very difficult to make it feel like you're interacting with the show, like you're really there. And this one really does it really well, and it should be commended for that, most definitely. Now to the part everybody wants to know, how is the fighting? Well, I can tell you the fighting is excellent. The fighting is really great. And to clarify for myself, I'm not an extremely experienced person when it comes to fighting games, but I can say that this fighting game is really easy to pick up to start and is very rewarding. Well, it's very easy to pick up and start, and it gives you great feedback that it makes you want to keep going and getting better. You can automatically do certain flashy combos right away by just pressing the heavier hits and the lower impact hits, and yet it's satisfying in that way. And then you can start messing and doing different combinations. And in itself, as a fighting game, it can be so deep, but yet someone can easily pick it up and be able to still get that amazing feedback to enjoy the game. And I think that's what makes a perfect fighting game. You want a fighting game that is not intimidating to every player. You want a fighting game that you can be able to have someone pick up and play and have fun with it, but then you also want a fighting game that's really in-depth, deep, and that it takes the time to master it, and it has both worlds, which that makes it a great fighting game. Truly makes it a great fighting game. And the complex fighting system really rewards the players that take the time to spend with it. Now, along with that, you can hit players with such impact that and here's another thing where it kind of matches the feel of the show, is that you can hit people with such impact. It has them flying and crashing into mountains, and then you're ending up in a new stage altogether. And I know that's not new for fighting games, but that's kind of how the show happens. And then also on top of that, sometimes your most powerful impacts can decimate the stage in front of you, and it completely creates a new stage, just like the show, where like literally they are destroying the planets that they are on, and it's leaving just messes everywhere. And this really captures that, and so it makes it feel like you're in this truly epic battle, and it just works so well. And basically they and the other thing that they capture is the speed. I mean, in the show, as you go on in the show, the characters get faster and faster, and then the way they just capture being able to be doing quick combos, but on top of that, it's not so fast that you as a player are not able to keep up with what's going on. Even the most inexperienced player with the game can still know what's going on in context and be able to do fast moves, to be able to be on their feet and be able to be competitive. And the fact that you can be competitive but yet have that awesome speed that the show shows all the time is really excellent to see. Now, the fighters are always 3-on-3. So, like I kind of said earlier, you have 3 fighters total, but it's 1-on-1 fighters against each other. You can call upon your other 2 players for a minor attack that they can do to try to impact the game. But then you also cleverly can switch out players mid-battle, even mid-combo, to help create an even bigger combo. And it's a good strategy to have. Sometimes when you're in a pickle, it really helps to kind of just switch out the player, and it allows you to kind of do a counter attack to their current attack that they are doing. Now, there are 22 fighters in the entire game total, and that you can fight with. And obviously they're not all unlocked from the start. You have to go through different ways to unlock them, whether that's you're going through the arcade modes, whether you're going through the story mode. There's a bunch of ways to unlock characters, but there are 22 total, with obviously more coming in DLC, which 2 were just announced recently. Now, there's such a variety in what you can do in the game. So there's the story mode. You also have the traditional arcade mode. You got practice. You have local play with your friends. So one-on-one basically against your friends. And then you also have online ranked and non-ranked matches. Now, I can tell you for the online structure, I have personally not ran into very much in regards to lag. I didn't run into any lag so far, and I have not run into any crashes in the server for myself, where a game stops midway because either they crashed or I crashed in regards to the server. And I can say one thing: the interface is not excellent, but they do a pretty decent tour right away in the beginning, so you can understand what these places are located and what they look like. But overall, I thought the experience of it works really, really well. Now, I did want to just do a quick shout out, because I usually do this in my spoiler talks. I just want to cover my favorite fighters of who is on my team, the team that I use for my top 3. Now, the clarification is not that these are my favorite fighters in the TV series, because I watch the TV series, I enjoy the TV series, and I have my favorite characters. These are my favorite 3 fighters to use in the game specifically to fight with. Now, my first fighter, and obviously I have a bunch of reasons why I picked them, but I'm just going to give you like 1 or 2 minor reasons why I picked them specifically. So, Gotenks. I picked Gotenks. I like his heavy attack. It's helpful because he has kind of he has some mini bombs in a sense that he uses partway through at the end of his attack, and that kind of allows a little variety that throws people off a little bit when in regards to his full-on attack. Also, sometimes the size difference, it throws other players off on how to approach it, because you feel like sometimes your player can't reach when the kicks are high. It feels like you're not hitting them, and I like the smallness that he offers in regards of his size to when you're going on one-on-one matches, especially against taller fighters. Now, my second one is Android 18. Her heavy attack is really interesting because her heavy attack at the end allows her to be in a vantage point that most heavy attacks don't let you be in, where the opponent is on the ground and you're kind of right above them, straight up right above them, which allows a different kind of advantage. And also it's so different. Sometimes I've noticed it throws some players off of how to approach it, because most people don't use that kind of fighter. There's a lot more powerful fighters on there, but I don't use them. And now finally, Gohan is my third and final player that I put on my team. I like his special because it's a defensive yet an attack position kind of attack. Literally, he kind of does like an explosion from the inside out that creates, in a sense, a shield. But then also, if they touch it, they're going to be bounced off of it, which is really, really excellent. So it's a great defensive tool, yet an attacking tool, and it allows me for better strategies in regards to using him. And each of them kind of have their own strategy that I use, and I like that they have a different strategy in regards to how I like to use them. So overall, personally, I think this is the best Dragon Ball property game ever made, personally. And for the people that are non-experienced and for the people that are majorly experienced in fighting games, I highly recommend this game for you. You easily can pick up this game and enjoy it, and I think easily enjoy it, easily pick up and play, and still be able to get the reward that you all want in regards to fighting games. And I will say I haven't had this much fun with a Dragon Ball Z game since, and this has been a long time ago, since Dragon Ball Z Ultimate Battle 22 for the PlayStation 1. I feel like the games since that have not really captured a good fighting game in regards to all the elements that it requires for being faithful to the property, and then also being just a good fighting game in general. So now, that is my review, but I just wanted to make you aware of something. I do not score games, and I'm only going to cover this on a couple of my reviews, and after this I promise I won't have this section anymore, but I do want to clarify why I do not do scores on my reviews. First, I think a score is not timeless, because if I gave a game an 8 today, which I'm not saying I'm giving Dragon Ball FighterZ an 8, not at all whatsoever, if I gave a game an 8 now, it would not be an 8 years from now. Like 4 years from now, it's not going to be an 8, so it's not timeless. The other part is I don't want people comparing scores. I think that's way too difficult to compare scores for a game, and we should be comparing our experiences. We shouldn't be comparing scores. Because your experience is not going to be the same as mine, and the point of this is for me to tell you about my experience and the things that I might have struggled with, the things that I found fascinating, the things I found cool, and to use that feedback and to use other feedback, because I know obviously people don't look at one source for all their choices. They look at multiple sources. So when you look at your other sources too, using mine as also feedback, that will make you have the final decision on choosing what kind of game you want, if you want to pick up this game or not. Now, finally, it makes my channel different. I know a lot of publications and channels, they give scores, and I don't want to do the same things they do. I want to do different things. So this is something that also makes my channel a little bit different. So that is it. That is my review for Dragon Ball FighterZ. What did you think of the game if you picked it up? What were your favorite fighters? What were the things you found cool and interesting about the game? And what were some of the things that you found that they could have improved on for the game? So maybe there is a Dragon Ball FighterZ 2 and see what they can improve on that one. So let me know in the comments below, and if you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and if you want to keep up with the content I'm releasing each and every week here on Freeze Frame Rate, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Mitch. I'm signing off saying see you soon.